In terms of teaching with integrity, how do you create meaningful long-term impact? By following the number one cardinal rule. So when I began teaching mindfulness, I was thinking, what will people think of me? But I don't know all of the neuroscience or the processes yet. I had a lot of self-doubt, like, will people accept me as a mindfulness teacher? I was comparing myself with some of today's top teachers in the world and thinking, well, I'm not as good as them. Or, how can I be teaching this if I'm not mindful all the time? But, I realized I was self-absorbed with worry and self-doubt and self-judgment, which is normal, it's understandable. We want to teach with integrity. We want to help people with accurate teachings. We want to lead people in a positive direction and not give them the wrong tools. So, it makes sense, but I was so self-absorbed with that worry that I really wasn't connected with who I was teaching. I became robot Sean, and I became rigid and just kind of plagued with this self-doubt. But of course, Dalai Lama said, the root of all great mindfulness teachings is a sense of compassion for others. And so, this is really that number one cardinal rule for all good mindfulness teachings, is having that sense of compassion, empathizing with who you're teaching, stepping in their shoes, getting a sense of what they're struggling with and how that feels, and then wishing them well. Having this active sense of wanting to help them in some way. Maybe it's looking at them with kind eyes. Maybe it's giving them a hug or getting them a cup of water or a tissue. Maybe it's, teaching them some mindfulness without judgment. Maybe it's asking how they're feeling. Whatever it is, maybe it's donating to a charity. But it's really all boils down to this sense of compassion. It's in the heart. If you're stuck in the head, you become robotic and self-absorbed in a way. Things become a little dry. But if you teach from the heart, from this place of compassion, that can really help you to unlock your inner wisdom, find your flow, to teach with a sense of intuition and trust that, whatever you say is going to have this flavor of compassion. And sometimes it's the sense of care that really helps someone versus exactly what you say. So it's really this sense of compassion. Who do you want to help? What are their struggles or stressors or pain points? Why do you care about them and their struggle? How can you make mindfulness relevant for them, for their struggle, for how they want to be in the world? What format makes most sense for them? What sequence will make this accessible for them given who they are, where they're at? What will help them to continue practicing? These are highly, highly, highly important questions to make teaching mindfulness very relevant for their actual struggle. What are their struggles? What do they want? What do they already do? What have they already tried? Part of this is just not assuming anything. Mindfulness is this non-judgmental awareness, and behind it there's this sense of curiosity or exploration for what's happening. And so as a mindfulness teacher, it's important to embody that sense of beginner's mind, that curiosity, by asking them these kinds of questions. Why do they want to be more mindful? When do they feel like they need to be more mindful? Can they commit to a practice in front of others to be held accountable? All of these questions here are very important to inquire about. But it's not just empathizing with who you're teaching, it's really having this active sense of wanting to relieve their suffering in some way. So it's a highly engaged practice where we are not just sort of sitting on the sidelines watching them suffer. We're actively wanting to help them in some way. And of course, it's important to be that example of non-judgmental awareness, not judging them for what they're doing, how they're feeling, but to be open and to really have that sense of care for how they're showing up in the world. So there's lots of specific practices around cultivating this sense of compassion, building a sense of confidence as you teach, refining your strategy, gaining relevancy, and also decreasing your judgments. And so there's lots of specific practices. You can go onto mindfulnessexercises.com, or you can choose to work with me one-on-one after this webinar to learn some of these specific practices. Diane Neal from Sur La Table, she was the CEO for several years, was able to help her quite a bit with a few professional challenges that she had with work and personal life. Feel very grateful to have helped her out with mindfulness.